It is. I must say, in some phone calls I've made today and people who've rung me, even those who don't like the Finkel review are all saying you put in a very good performance yesterday, very thorough, and answered every question. So I congratulate you on what must have been a very difficult time for you, because to get across something as big as that and then answer all those questions can't be easy. I've been there and done that. I know how hard it can be. But let's just go through some of the difficulties. Obviously, coal is the difficulty. Some way, you've got 22 or whatever it is get up and oppose it, and led by Tony Abbott. But I don't think it's about leadership or stirring the pot. Tony's always had the same view on this. I've had conversations with him about it for years. So you can't sort of say, he's doing the wrong thing. He's following what he believes in, and that's what all of you should be doing. But that having been said, how do you resolve it? Because it seems to me that there has to be some room for coal. You've got all these massive subsidies that have been given to wind and solar. And yet people whinge when Adani want to get something of a subsidy, or at least a guarantee of a loan.
Well, let me say up front, Richo, that the Finkel report is a report to government, not a report by government. It did come as a result of the COAG Energy Council commissioning Australia's chief scientist to produce this report in the wake of the blackout in South Australia, with a primary focus on how to stabilise the electricity system. Now, it's a more than 200-page document. We just got it a few days ago, so we'll give it due consideration. Now, one of the big issues he's trying to solve for is the lack of investment in the electricity market as coal-fired power stations close. The last coal-fired power station built in Australia was in Cogan Creek in Queensland near Chinchilla, which was in 2007. The last gas-fired power station built in Australia was in Mortlake in Victoria in 2010. The only new generation that's come on in recent years has been renewables, supported by the Renewable Energy Target. Now, you're right, coal is a critical part of Australia's energy mix today and into the future. We get more than 60% of the national electricity market's energy from coal, and it underwrites the stability and affordability of the system. So we need to make sure it stays in the system longer. Interestingly, under Alan Finkel's model, coal will continue to play an important part, and even by 2030 will still supply more than 50% of our energy. Now, we're seeing a lot of the coal-fired power stations close, 9 in the last 5 years, and what we need to do is try to create a regulatory framework that creates investment certainty, so that those coal-fired power stations can go to their banks and get the financial support to do an upgrade or a maintenance job. And if we can do that, then coal will stay in the system longer, and conceivably a new coal-fired power station could be built, even though it hasn't been done so for the last decade. Yeah, well, because there are a couple of problems with this. One is that there are quite a number who are scheduled to close, aren't they, in the next even 3 or 4 years, and that's going to be a debacle unless something's done about that. But secondly, and I guess this is more importantly, when you say that it's possible to get an upgrade and all the rest of it, it all costs money. And the banks are so reluctant because, they get boycotts, they get threats, and our banks are a lot of things, but courageous is not one of the adjectives I describe to them. And of course, they just aren't lending to coal. How would you get around that? Well, you're right that the next big coal-fired power station to close is in New South Wales. It's called Liddell. It's owned by AGL, and it's around 2,000 megawatts. So it's even bigger than Hazelwood is. So it's an important plant, and the company has announced it's closing in 2022. Now, by creating a regulatory framework, all the feedback from the investment community to the Finkel review is that, at least with certainty about the system in which they're operating in, decisions can be made by banks as to whether they want to invest in an upgrade of coal. You see, existing coal assets do provide affordable base load power. New coal-fired power stations are more expensive to build, but existing coal-fired power stations are very competitive. So if you can keep them in the system longer, which Alan Finkel's Clean Energy Target does do, then you can keep electricity prices lower. And I have to point out that Alan Finkel's report and his recommendation would allow electricity prices to fall by about 10% by 2030, and for industrial users by 16 to 20%.
But see, that's not very much. I mean, I've got other questions to ask, but I mean, that's not very much. That's 1% a year. I mean, that's not going to thrill people too much because, you know, some of the bills have gone up 15 and 16% in the last couple of years, haven't they?
They certainly have gone up a lot, but it is still a significant amount of money. But if you ask me what is the quickest way to get electricity prices down, I think it's unequivocally getting more gas into the grid. And right now, we're seeing 2/3 of what we produce export, and mad restrictions and moratoriums in Victoria, the Northern Territory, and indeed in your state of New South Wales, they import 95% of their gas. So if they're going to be serious about getting electricity prices down, they need to get more gas into the system, and the Turnbull government is determined to restrict exports as a means of trying to get those prices down.
But we've also got massive gas reserves in the Northern Territory, in Queensland, Bass Strait. They're all over the place. There's so much that's still to be developed, isn't there?
Well, that's right. In the Northern Territory, there is 180 years worth of gas under the ground. This is unconventional gas, which the Northern Territory government says they won't allow people to develop. Hopefully they will change their position. In Western Australia, you're right, there's an abundant supply of gas and it's a major export industry. The problem is, how do you get that gas from the West Coast to the East Coast? We announced a few $1 million in the most recent budget for a study of a pipeline, and it goes back to Rex Connor's day, you will remember, Richo, to build a pipeline from the west to the east. Other ideas have been mooted about building LNG terminals in Victoria where you could ship it around from the west to the east. These are all ideas that are seriously being looked at, but you wouldn't need to do this if these states released more gas out of the ground and into the system.
Yeah, look, I know, but just to return to a point you just made about AGL and Liddell, it just happens that tonight, when I'm sitting there watching a bit of Sky in between my pre-records and other things that I've got to do here, I note there's an AGL ad proudly announcing we're getting out of coal. You know, and that's supposed to be some really positive thing for them that they're spending money telling people about. It's not very encouraging for trying to sort out Liddell, is it?
Well, the reality is Liddell is a big money maker for AGL, just like other coal-fired power stations are right now big money makers for their owners, and that is a function of the high price and also the fact that gas, which has tripled in price over the last 5 years, is increasingly setting the price of electricity. Because coal has come out, gas is now needed to come in order to meet demand. So it's a very complicated system. But the reality is we are now paying more for our gas and as a result more for our electricity, and the coal generators that are still in the system are doing really, really well, which makes it very important that we get more investment fast, not just in renewables, but also in other forms of generation in order to meet the future demand for the country.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just worried about where the investment's going to come from. I mean, the subsidies involved in wind and solar are huge. I note even Finkel is not optimistic in the short to medium term about batteries. And thank God for that. I think that fella Musk is one of the great fraudsters of our time. He's got $6 billion in subsidies to still lose money. And no one's buying his car, so it can't be all that flash. So
but you know his market cap, Richo, of Tesla is now more than GM or Ford. Believe that.
Well, I mean, why won't people buy the bloody things? That's the big question. There must be something wrong with them because they're not exactly, you know, just running out the door, are they? They seem to be pretty much stalled. Now, if I get back to coal and politics, Adani would have to be back on our agenda. Now, it seems to me things are going positively in the direction of Adani actually starting up. What's your view of the more recent developments?
Well, we've only heard positive signs out of the company, and their recent announcement in Townsville that it's gone through the final investment decision is a positive. Obviously, we believe that the Adani coal mine will create thousands of jobs, and in Townsville there is 11% unemployment. That's why everyone can't believe that Cathy O'Toole, the local Labor member, has gone silent on this issue. She won't. She's happy to have a photo, but she's not happy to be a public advocate for a big job-creating industry.
One word in support. I agree with that entirely.
That's right.
Very disappointing.
And the Labor Party more generally, your Labor Party, is very divided. You've got David Feeney, Peter Khalil, Senator Lisa Singh, who've all come out opposed. Bill Shorten, who's sitting on the fence getting splinters up the backside because he can't take a position on this. And then you've got others like the member for Shortland, who understands coal because he's got Vales Point in his own electorate, who's spoken very positively about Adani and said, don't talk to me about climate change when you've got Adani and the potential to create jobs there and to help many hundreds of millions of people out of energy poverty. So there is a divided opposition on this issue, whereas our position, from the member for Capricornia to the member for Dawson to a whole range of members up north in Queensland, we support them on.
I might say I wouldn't call you exactly united on energy policy in the Liberal and National parties, because I think yesterday demonstrated that. But certainly, Adani remains, right up there as a top priority. But Labor's got this problem of inner city seats, and that's why it took a while to sort out an agreement between Anastasia Palaszczuk and Jackie Trad in Queensland, the Deputy Premier. And of course David Feeney represents an inner city seat which has got a big Green vote. And I think Bill Shorten has been concerned about losing ground in the inner city for some time, and it makes it very difficult for Labor to make a stand. Thing is, I reckon if you stand on principle, you can never go too far wrong. And I think while you might get punished in one particular area for it, you won't in the rest of Australia, because people are crying out for it. Now, when can pensioners and people who today are really struggling to be able to afford to turn on the heater in the middle of winter, when can they expect a real result in reducing their problems? When can they expect prices to actually go down, not 1% a year, because that's not going to help them much.
Well, as you know, we announced in the budget a measure to alleviate some of the pressure on household budgets when it came to pensioners and their energy payments. So I think it was $75 for a single and $125 for a couple. Now that will only go some way because electricity prices are rising. Like I said, the quickest way to bring down electricity prices is to get more gas into the system, and that is why the Prime Minister has announced the restrictions on exports. We want the mechanism to be in place from the 1st of July this year, and we're doing a number of other things to rein in prices and to rein in the cost that the networks are charging, the poles and the wires, to rein in the retail prices. We've got the ACCC looking into that. And of course, we're trying to solve for this investment uncertainty by creating a more stable regulatory environment. So there's a lot of things we're doing, Richo. There's no silver bullet, I have to say.
No, that's right.
And it will take some time.
Well, I wish more strength to your arm, Josh, and thanks very much for your time.